You get thrust out of the life stream. Okay, this is what happens. So you'll know the event when you see it, when you sense your child experiencing it, because you will have a child before the event and you will have a child after the event. And you'll always have that sense that they're not quite the same now. And they don't go back to that previous level of functioning. Now, a lot of times, if they do go back to a previous level of functioning, then you know, we're fine. And you do have to give the body and the nervous system time to heal, right? And sleep is really important, and eating well, and being with friends, and having, you know, parents who really reassure you, and all of those good things are all important to help the healing process. So to me, 7 months doesn't sound that long, okay? But you will notice when your child is different. And they will, there are two different patterns of responding, okay? When a child, in fact, because remember, not everyone who experiences a trauma becomes traumatized. I really want you to hear that, okay? That's very important. So tonight, we're not talking about the majority of kids who do great, right? You don't come to these things to learn about, you know, if you already know your children are doing well, or one of your children is doing really well, you're going to be concerned about the one, or the, you know, the niece or the nephew or whoever you have in your life who isn't doing well. That's who we're talking about tonight, okay? So the possibility that an event happens that thrusts them out of the life stream, okay, is what we're talking about here, because this can really impair their ability to self-regulate. So there's one of two, well, let's do both, okay? Two different patterns of responding are possible when an event happens. Okay, now you have to understand the quality of the event, right? It's out of their control, it's unpredictable, it comes out of the blue, it rocks their world, it rips the ground right from underneath their feet, right? The life becomes scary after that. You know, I don't control everything. I don't know what's going to happen to me. Anything could happen. So that's the kind of event we're talking about. And when that happens to them, they can either become over-aroused or under-aroused. The point being that they're no longer in the life stream. And what is the life stream? It's probably obvious to you now. The life stream is that zone of optimum arousal, right? When we're in the life stream with everybody else, we're in our optimum zone. When an event happens and we are thrust out of it, we start to sense like things aren't as easy for me anymore, right? And children have a sense of that from a very young age. They know that things were easier before and they're not as easy now. That life was happy, the world was a good place, people were good, everything was honky-dory, and then it wasn't anymore, right? Now it's a little scarier, and I'm a little more trepid, and I'm a little less trusting, and, right? There's a shift that happens when we have this kind of an event. So we either become over-aroused or under-aroused. What do you think you would see in your children with this over-aroused pattern? What do you think you might see?
High anxiety.
Yeah, high anxiety. And it might even look like hyperactivity, right? Which is, you know, a lot of times it's not hyperactivity, it's high anxiety. But it looks like it can be this, and that's how too many of our children, of course, are on these ridiculous medications that aren't working, that have a lot of side effects, when it looks hyper. In fact, it's more of a hypervigilance. Right? It's a fear. It's now a terror or severe anxiety. What else do you think you'd see in an over-aroused pattern?
Crying.
Crying.
Anger.
Anger, right? Even rage. So this is where you can see temper tantrums and fighting, right? Hitting and really acting out, throwing things and kicking and, right? All of that. You would start to see an acting out display when they're in this over-aroused pattern. You also get paranoia and suspicion, like they think they see things are going on that aren't really going on, and you're looking at me funny, or he took my pencil, did you see that? He took my pencil, and, you know, just this anxiety that's causing them to see things that may not really be going on. So you're asking about the under-aroused pattern. Thank you that you brought us back to that, because we talked a little bit about what some of the over-aroused behaviors are. Under-aroused, what do you think you might see in your child if they're under-aroused?
No crying.
No crying.
Withdrawn.
Zoning.
Withdrawn.
Yeah.
Zoning out. Shut down. Spacey.
Not eating.
Not eating.
Cautious.
Cautious. Overly cautious, right? Yeah.
Oversleeping.
Yes. Yes. Sleepy. Tired. This is, you know, where there's more of like a flat affect, right? So they're not really expressing a range of emotions, but are more restricted in their ability to feel and demonstrate, express their emotions. And of course, inattention, right? Because they're just sort of, you know, these are the kinds of kids, sometimes you're looking right at them, and they're looking right at you, but they're not really there. It almost looks like they're looking through you. And you'll have to say something 3 or 4 or 5 times, and they aren't, you know, they're right in front of you, and you're saying it, but they keep saying, could you say that again? Could you say that again? Because they're not really there. They're zoning out, right? We call that in the clinical field dissociation, right? Where sometimes they're just not even in their body. They're floating away somewhere. So it can be really common, and it goes undetected. And again, it's inattention, so sometimes it looks like ADHD, and kids are put on medication for that because we want them to be more focused and hearing what we're saying, right? So that's what it looks. A lot of these kids too, they end up becoming those kids that are just bored all the time. I'm bored. Who cares? Why should I bother? Doesn't matter anyway. What difference is it going to make, right? And they just sort of go into this state of giving up and shutting down and not really participating. Because guys, the stream of life, to be in the stream of life means you're engaged in life. You're part of it, right? So you're not approaching it this way. You're not up here making yourself and everybody else crazy. You're engaged in a healthy way in the life process. You're in the present moment to learn. You're in the present moment. You can behave pro-socially and adaptively. So that's what we want for our kids. So how do we make sure they get there? Let's now talk about the kinds of things that we know from the research help our kids to be in the zone. Okay. I'm just going to try to keep using, oh dear.
My wife has a suggestion, but she's making me do it.
Yeah?
I was thinking that maybe those are loose ends.
If you actually don't mind erasing this, and if you loosen this up completely, you can just...
Yeah, just keep flipping it around, right?
Yeah, well, you have to start over on this one. So
okay. That would be good.
It's supposed to do that.
Oh, and you know what? We should do it from this way.
Okay.
You know why? Right, you're out of your zone.
I'm out of my zone.
You're not in the zone of optimum arousal. Okay.
I'll be back over here.
Okay, yeah,
You're welcome.
So the most important thing, of course, why I'm so excited to be doing this talk, is that we want to prevent the dysregulation of the nervous system as much as possible, right? So we just want to be aware that from 0 to 3 and 0 to 5, there's so much brain development going on, right? That if we are, you know, soothing, we're not leaving them, right, to soothe themselves, but we are actively responding to them when they express a need for us. When we do that, they are going to develop a healthy ability to self-regulate. Or we know that they do have to do something scary like a medical procedure, but we talk to them about it beforehand. We show them, we go to the hospital and show them this is where it's going to happen. And remember your doctor, this is Dr. whoever, and you know him, and you introduce him to the nurses that'll be there, and you know, you take them through. There's a whole process that you can go through to prepare kids, right? For surgeries, medical procedures, dental procedures even. I don't know if any of you have dental trauma, but that's never fun, and a lot of our children end up with that. But they're sorry? Moving, right? Which I had to go through with my own son. So we did a lot of preparation around it. Now that doesn't mean that there wasn't a period of about 2 months where there was some normal angst around it, even with all the preparation.
Yeah.
But then it was gone. Then now he's adjusted and everything is fine because we did all the preparation, right? All right, so here's our brain. Here's the brainstem, okay? All I want you to know about the brain is that it's triune. It has 3 parts. This part here is the reptilian brain, or the animal brain. And it's actually what we've shared with every living creature on Earth for over 280 million years. So the patterns of this brain are deeply, deeply ingrained and are very automatic and instinctual, okay? So the language of this brain is sensations. And in fact, this is the only part of the brain that we have at birth. We have little pieces of the visual cortex, small pieces that are underdeveloped, and the rest of the brain, all that we have is this reptilian brain. Now, knowing that its language is sensations makes a lot of sense because our babies are so sensory. Everything is sensory driven. It's about the sucking and the cooing and the rocking and the eating and the smelling, right? Smelling mom and smelling all and of course their sight is developing. So they're very sensory, and these experiences are very important to them and to the development of the rest of their brain. If we are communicating with them through their senses, we're resonating with them. They're not going to get a lot from our words. They don't actually have the part of the brain yet that understands words. Okay, so let's talk about the other parts of the brain. This is what they have at birth, the brainstem, okay? The reptilian brain, or the brainstem, which speaks the language of sensations. Now, very close, all in here, very close to the reptilian brain is the midbrain, or the limbic brain. And this is the seat of our emotions. The language of this part of the brain is our feelings. And deep within it is something called, very important for you to know, and you'll see why, is the amygdala. The amygdala acts as a smoke screen. It detects what we should be focusing on. It makes very, very quick judgments, scans the environment, and decides very quickly what it is we should be focusing on, okay? Now, this is tucked in very close to the brainstem, and wrapped around that, so here is the brainstem, here is the limbic brain, my thumb, the tip of my thumb is the amygdala, and the third part of the brain wraps around all of that to protect it. Because what you need to know that's most important here is that the brainstem mediates our fight or flight response. It mediates our arousal levels. So you'll start to make these connections quickly, that the brainstem is what's really mediating our ability to self-regulate our arousal. Very, very critical. So we'll see when there are breakdowns in this ability, it has to do with the activation of the brainstem. So we'll go into that. But know that this oldest part of our brain is what prepares us, helps us to be prepared for survival if we need to go into a fight or flight response. And the amygdala is what decides, sends a message to that part of the brain. When the amygdala decides that we are under threat, we're in danger, it sends this message to that part of the brain to say, yes, we need to be in fight or flight right now. Now, it sends a message to the rest of the brain too. So what is the rest of the brain? The neocortex, right? This newest part of our brain. And it is what mediates all of school functioning. So the neocortex is responsible for things like planning, impulse control, organization, learning from past experience, empathy. It really is our center of rationality and reason, and it's what we're most proud of. It's what sets us apart from animals. So we value this part of the brain, and we really need it when we think about all of the challenges and all of the demands that are placed on our children in school at such a young age, usually before they're ready, really, in terms of brain development,